What's up, y'all? It's Shuffle, and today we're going to talk about Iron Oath, and I'm going to give my first impressions of it. This game was made by Curious Panda. So far, it is still in early access, but the early access is public as of April 19th, so when this video goes up. But I was able to play it yesterday, so I'm going to talk about what I think. In this video, I'm going to cover what I like and didn't like about the game, as well as just some overall thoughts here at the end. If you just want a TLDR of what the game feels like from 5 hours of playing it, it feels like if Darkest Dungeon and Battle Brothers met up and had a kid together. It borrows quite a bit from both games, but it does have enough of its own charm and merit that it can stand on its own. Alright, so the things I like about this game are the character building. I love the pixel art. The music is really awesome. I remember when I was streaming it today, my chat room was asking a lot of questions about the OST, like when can we get it? Is it on YouTube? This and that, and every time I would like step away to do something and they could just hear the music, they would talk about how much they liked it. The game itself has some pretty big tabletop RPG vibes, so if you've ever just played D&D or Pathfinder or Call of Cthulhu, just whatever, it'll definitely give you those vibes while you're playing. As a person or as a game player, when I play video games, something I really look for and enjoy a lot usually, like the main reason I play video games, it's not the stories and the graphics and all that, which are all cool and they're nice to have. I like to play games for mechanics. I like mechanics that can challenge me and make me think about stuff, and I can be really creative. And anytime a game rewards creativity or rewards you for understanding the game, it's a great feeling. I felt this game did a really good job of that, and the mechanics themselves were really fun to interact with. Some of them were similar to other things that I talked about from other games, so they kind of felt familiar at that point. But the things it did differently from those other games is what made it stand out. I really like the way the characters are upgraded. So you have, I believe, 6 different attributes, and depending on what class you are, you have 2 of those attributes that are pretty much your favored ones. So you're more incentivized to level those up compared to the other ones. But every stat does something, and that's pretty fun. As well as the ability trees for each skill. We only get half of them right now because of this point of early access, but all of the talent trees were pretty fun to look at and theorycraft with, even with just having the first half of them. Most of the first half of talent trees were pretty basic things that you would assume, such as the ability gets extended range, it might do more damage, you might get extra charges for using it, and I have to talk about charges here in a sec. Just things like that. Later things in the talent trees, especially the ones that you can't get to in early access, some of these can fundamentally change the abilities, and that is something I think is awesome. Accuracy is always a funny thing to talk about with RPG games, especially roguelikes or roguelites or whatever they're called these days. And this game is no different. It has accuracy on your basic attack. So every character is allowed to have a certain number of skills, and each of those skills have charges, and you can recharge them either with, I believe it says you can do it with consumables, but I never found them, and you can do it while you camp. So whereas other RPG games like this will let you spam your abilities, or they might give you cooldowns on them, this game is saying you have to go through part of the dungeon or most of the dungeon only having 3 shots of your heal, for example, which really changes how you approach the game. All of your skills are automatically going to hit enemies, which is cool. The only thing where accuracy matters is your basic attack, and I think that is perfectly fine. I think that's a really good middle ground between people like me who pretty much detest accuracy as a mechanic, and then the people that really do like it because, you know, haha, I missed a 92% chance is funny. Of course, there are ways to mitigate accuracy via traits, so your characters get individual little quirks that let them have different stats or alter how they interact with stuff. So it's really fun to look at that when you get recruits. But besides that, you can mitigate accuracy by flanking your opponents. I love the concept of flanking. In my current Pathfinder game, my friend and I, we made a pair of brothers, and our whole gimmick is to flank the enemy and kill it in like however many turns. So I'm definitely in a flank hype mode right now. And I like flanking a lot in this game, alongside the attacks of opportunity and all those other TTRPG mechanics that I was referring to. One other thing that really stands out when you're exploring in dungeons, aka expeditions, you have this time meter in the bottom. It was a little weird to look at and understand at first just by reading it, but once you play with it for honestly like 5 minutes, you'll probably pick it up pretty easily. And the time meter is adjusted based on the difficulty you're playing on. So I was playing on Adventure, which is pretty much easy at the start of this, just because I didn't know what was going on. But I definitely will crank up the difficulty once I feel comfortable. And I think the time meter is going to be one of the biggest factors when doing that. So on Adventure difficulty, the time meter goes up to 20, and everything you do in the dungeon takes time and adds it to the meter. Once the meter hits 20, it resets back to 0. But once it passes back to 0, your party gains a condition for the rest of the expedition. This condition is not good. There are different ones you can get, but all of them so far that I've encountered have been very harmful. The one I've gotten 2 times, I believe, is one that makes it so my party is going to get injured more consistently than they were before. So if you think of, again, Battle Brothers, where when you get hit by certain weapons, you get certain injuries to certain body parts, which affect your stats. That type of system is in this game. So if your party is more prone to injury and they fail to disarm a trap and it springs on them, they're all going to take a bunch of damage and get some injuries. So you really want to manage the time meter as much as possible. If you're able to camp, that resets it. So you have to time your camp very well to get the maximum benefit of not only the recovery it provides, but also the time management. When you're in battle, the amount of turns you take add to the time meter as well. So if you take 3 turns to finish a battle, it adds 3 to the time meter afterwards. When you travel from square to square, when you're in the expedition, that takes time. When you encounter events such as disarming traps or looting backpacks and stuff that you come across, all of that takes set amounts of time. So you are incentivized to try and push through as quickly as you can. I think another reason that it applies to battles is to prevent stalling, but we'll talk about that later. The final thing regarding the time meter is that you can scout the dungeon at pretty much any time you choose to. You just right click the tile, and I don't quite know what dictates how far ahead you can scout, but I've seen it be 1 to like 3 or 2 or 3 tiles or whatever ahead. Overall, I don't actually like the time meter that much, but I'll explain why here in a sec. But regardless of that, with scouting and the events and stuff like that, I do think it's an interesting system, and I do think they did it well, but I'll have to talk about why I don't like it specifically. We're heading into the dislike portion of the video now, and these dislikes don't mean that the game is just, bad or unplayable. I really did enjoy my time with the game, but I want to make sure that I can explain where I personally didn't have 100% fun as compared to what I was doing before, and also show that I can at least try and be even-handed with my criticism. The reason I don't really like the time meter right now is because I don't like to be pushed through what I'm doing when I play games like these. If I'm playing a turn-based tactical RPG game, I really don't want that. Like, I want to be able to sit there and think and plan out what I'm doing. And of course, you have all the time in the world in this game to do that, but I want to explore. I want to push my team to the limit. I want to run out of items to use because I went as far as I could before I left. And the time meter kind of takes away from that. The other reason I'm not a big fan of it is because it really feels like it's there to prevent stalling on the player's part, which I totally understand. Stalling is kind of frustrating in a lot of games, especially how it's handled, or if you're watching someone play the game or playing it yourself, knowing that you have to do it or knowing that your favorite streamer's doing it or something could not be the most fun experience. But that being said, the reason I think the time meter exists is to prevent stalling, but it doesn't need to exist in order to do that, at least for this purpose. And when I say this purpose, I mean the battles. If the battles didn't add to the time meter, I don't think that would really change too much. It's okay if they add the 1 because that's the square you went into, but if the fight takes, 3 rounds and it adds 3 to the time meter, I really don't think that's necessary. The reason for this is this game doesn't really seem to have an advantage to stalling right now. Your moves have limited charges and you only get so many chances to camp in your expeditions that I don't think you really need the game telling you, yeah, if you stall, you're getting not only these penalties of running out of charges on your moves, but also the expedition's just going to get harder. And sometimes it kind of forces you to do things that seem disadvantageous, such as when you start a fight, your group might have a really good spot behind them with like 1 choke point or 2 choke points and a hazard that you can kick things into and, stun them. And because of the way the time meter works with battles and stuff, you won't want to do that. You're incentivized instead to try and run up to the enemy as quickly as possible and start fighting immediately. That's not to say you can't back up and use the terrain to your advantage, which you totally can, but the game just doesn't seem to value that. Another thing I'm kind of mixed on, I don't dislike it per se, but I also don't like it. It's that your armor and weapons decay over time, and I don't think there's currently a way to fix them. So the longer you wear gear, just gets beat up, and eventually it runs out of durability and then it breaks. The system doesn't matter too much for a lot of the lower level gear that you're going to go through anyway that you can buy at any shop. This is more in reference to some of the nicer stuff you find. Like I bought a stronger than normal bow for my huntress, and just knowing that that's going to eventually wear out and break and I'll never have it again doesn't feel that good. Again though, I haven't had my whole party just run out of equipment yet, so I can't say for sure if this is a good or a bad thing. But right now, it just feels like it might be a problem for some other players. I did have someone in my stream who did know a lot about the game. They've spent over 100 hours on it, and I believe they said their brother is one of the developers, so he has a lot of insights into how the game's going to progress and what it's done so far. And I believe he was talking about how the top end of gear, like the super rare stuff or like the unique stuff or whatever they're going to implement for that system, they will have a way to preserve those, because they do understand that it won't be fun to get, really good gear that you fought really hard for, that may be, crazy in terms of how it looks or what it can do. And then instead of being able to use that as your late game reward and have fun with it, it's just going to break eventually. So hopefully they find out something to do with that. Another thing I didn't really vibe with was the dungeons felt a bit empty. I understand why they need to have empty tiles. You can't have tiles, or I should say you shouldn't have tiles where the dungeon's like 15 tiles long or big or whatever, and 13 of those tiles have either fights or events or whatever. You just can't have that, so I understand. But even then, the dungeons themselves just felt kind of empty. So I don't know what would be a way to fix this. It might just be me being hyperbolic, I'm not quite sure. But maybe something like having dialogue that pops up between the characters when you're running around, that could help alleviate stuff. But I do realize that's a lot of extra work. And honestly, I feel like it's going to be a thing where once you just understand the game enough, or you play it a lot, you probably won't care anymore, and you'll actually want less things. It'll just be like, how fast can I get through this dungeon? Where are the fights? Where's the loot? Let me leave. My final point of contention was that the beginning of the game was a bit too text heavy. I understand why, they're really trying to build a narrative and a world and make it immersive. And I said before, I play games for mechanics primarily. And it's not that the lore was bad or wasn't enjoyable. Like my chat room, when I was streaming it, was really enjoying it, and I was reading everything I could, and I was having fun too. So it's not that I didn't enjoy it. It's just more that when you start playing the game and it gives you, a lot of narrative and exposition, you want to just play it sometimes. Again, this probably won't be a problem later on down the line, because there's going to come a point where the game stops holding your hand, which is totally cool. But also, my perspective might be a little different because I'm a content creator, so I'm sitting there trying to make sure everyone gets the full experience, whereas if I was playing this myself, I probably would have just skimmed it and clicked through it. Overall though, I really do like Iron Oath. I think this game has a bright future. I've heard that currently the game has 15 or so, maybe 20 hours of gameplay, and that's honestly more than enough for an early access type of thing. I'm really curious to see where the game's going to go in terms of the story, in terms of what classes they add, what monsters you get to fight, and whatever other changes they come up with. Currently, the game is on Steam and GOG, so if you have one of those two clients, you could get the game yourself on the 19th. And I don't know if there's been any confirmation of console ports or something, but just looking at the interface and how it's structured with the two very concise rows of actions and then the individual character actions, I could honestly see this game being on console. Again, I don't know if that's what they intend. I don't know if they said anything about that, but that's the feeling I'm getting. All right, y'all, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching. As I said before, I really did like this game. I can't wait to try and finish it and play more of it. If you want to check it out yourself, I will link the game down in the description. So if you like a lot of the games that I've been talking about in comparison to this through this video, you'll probably like this, and I believe it's supposed to be $20 USD. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.